In this video, we're going to look at setting up a plant commodity pathway initiated PRA. This type of PRA may arise from a request to import a new plant commodity or a commodity from a new country of origin. When you start a new PRA, it is important to consider whether you want to include the input of colleagues who also have access to the PRA tool. I am currently in my personal view, which is highlighted in blue, and this shows a list of the PRAs I have created. However, for this example, I'm going to set up this new PRA in a team view so I can share the editing. It is not currently possible to move a PRA from a personal to a team view. Here I have a CABI team. I'm going to click on that, and you'll see that some PRAs that already exist in this team view cover both pathway and pest types. So in this demonstration, I'm going to recreate this first example, which is a PRA for importing apples from South Africa to Zambia. So I'm going to click on this button to start a new PRA by pathway. The background and scope of the PRA is entered into this initiation page. So I need to add a title. Importing apples from South Africa to Zambia. And then I need to decide whether this is a demo or a live PRA. For this example, I'm going to select yes, that it is a demo PRA. The difference between a demo and a live PRA is that when you enter pest status updates into a live PRA, these are then saved and carried forwards for future pest lists. So if you don't want that to happen, you can select yes, that this is a demo or test PRA. So there are some calendars here to select the start date, and if you want to, you can also enter a completion date for your PRA. And this is useful in the PRA index. It can show you which ones are due to be completed soon. So you can enter information about the PRA area, so this may be just part of the country, or it may be the whole country, and also the reason for the PRA request. So this is going to be an import request. And I could fill in as many details as I have about the background to the request here. The next thing is to set up the pathway. So this is a very specific pathway. We know the country of origin, so we're going to select South Africa. And we're importing the commodity into Zambia. And the commodity I'm importing is apple. So if I enter the common name, you'll see there are a few species of crop that have apple in the common name. So you need to make sure that you're selecting the appropriate scientific name. Now, in some cases, there may be pest records in the crop protection compendium for the species level, for a subspecies, and also for the genus. So if there are various options available, you should select them all in order to get the most comprehensive pest list. The next part of the initiation is to select the commodity type. So in this case, I'm going to select fruits. But often fruits are imported with the stems attached, so I also want to select stems as well. It's optional to select the commodity type, but this may help you to reduce the pest list that is derived from the crop protection compendium data. It is important to consider whether any previous PRAs already exist, and there's an option here to select yes, where you can add in the details if there's a similar or a much earlier PRA request. The next question concerns the weed potential of the commodity. Is the commodity itself likely to become an invasive weed? If that is the case, it is suggested that you conduct a pest-initiated PRA for that plant. Next thing is to enter as much information of the pathway as you have. This may be from the export or import request. This might include information about the production areas, the practices for harvesting, processing, packaging, and also the mode and route of transport. And then you may have information about the commodity volume to enter here as well. You'll see that there's a field available to add some references at this point, which may be relevant, particularly if you've added details of previous PRAs. So we have now entered the background information to generate a pest list associated with those details. So there's an option here to generate the full pest list of all pests, or to select certain groups of pests only. So in this case, you might decide that plants are not really of concern with this pathway. You don't even want to consider them. So you can opt to remove those, and also the diseases of unknown etiology, from the pest list. This can't be reversed, so think carefully about which pest groups you're excluding. This information is included on the PRA report, so there is a record of your choice here. So I now have a message on my screen here to say pests with this symbol, this orange symbol here, have been included or excluded by you in a previous PRA, and I can click OK. This means that a previous live PRA has added information to overrule the CPC pest status, and it's that information that is now being used for the pests that are indicated for generating the pest lists associated with this pathway. So that's the difference between setting up a live and a demo PRA. And we'll have a look at that a bit later on. If we look at this page in the PRA, you'll see that there are 3 tabs relating to stages of the PRA process. This first one is looking at the pest lists and the risk assessments. The next one is for pest risk management and for the PRA summary. The pest lists are a big part of a pathway PRA, and it's a particular strength of the CPC with the detailed information it contains on the crops that are hosts and also the distribution. So the 2 lists that are presented are the pests that are potentially requiring phytosanitary measures. So these are the pests that are recorded on apple. They're recorded as present in South Africa, but not recorded as present in Zambia, the importing country. So these are the pests that would be those of concern for the remainder of the PRA. These are the ones that meet the basic criteria of a quarantine pest for this pathway. A second list is also available to view, called Pests Excluded from the Assessment. And you'll see here, there are some that have this icon, which show that they have been excluded in a previous PRA session. And in general, if you have a look at the data here, these have been excluded because they're already recorded as present in Zambia. So the pest list has been generated for all the pests that are associated with apples in South Africa. And then those presented on the first page are the ones of concern for our PRA. The pest list is shown as an alphabetic list by species name, but you can sort and filter using these tools at the top. For instance, you could filter to display just the arthropods here, which might help you to work through them because these lists are sometimes very long. The additional fields are those that we set up in the initiation page. So this tells us that all these pests have been recorded on the crop and are present here in the country of origin and in the importing country. When we look at the column for commodity type, you'll see that some of them have a question mark. This is because the CPC data is not complete for this data set. So there is no information in the compendium about whether the particular pest can be transported internationally on apple fruits and stems. These may be a focus for editing the pest list. So the CPC provides a very good starting point for the PRA, but it is expected that you edit these pest lists to make them more accurate using information that you have from other sources. In particular, as a risk assessor, say in this case in Zambia, you would probably have more information that some of these pests are already present in Zambia. We just haven't recorded them in the crop protection compendium. If they're already present and not under official control, they do not meet the criteria of a quarantine pest and should be excluded from the assessment. So I'm just going to take an example here. Quite randomly, I'm going to choose apple mosaic virus and show you that there are some options for editing the pest list. So here I can select the option to exclude from the assessment. And I can choose the reason for its exclusion. So in this particular case, I have information that apple mosaic virus is already present in Zambia. I'm not interested in it further in this PRA. So I'm going to select the option that it is present in the importing country. I'm going to add a reference. It's important to add as much information as you have available, because that will then be carried through into your PRA report. And I'm going to save that record. And you'll see that apple mosaic virus has now been removed from the list of pests potentially requiring phytosanitary measures. Instead, it is now included here on the list of pests excluded from the assessment. And because this status update was made in this current PRA, it is shown with a black modified by user icon. So the orange ones came from a previous PRA, and this black one is one that I've added in this current session. Similarly, there may be pests that have been excluded from the assessment that I want to include. So for instance, I might choose this one here, because I have information that although it's present in Zambia, it is actually already under official control. And I'm going to add some information there. So that's the painted bug I've just edited. And you'll see now I can switch lists and display it on the pest that I'm now concerned about. So the painted bug has been moved to the list of pests potentially requiring phytosanitary measures. If I click on this symbol here under the notes column, you'll see that that information is available to view. So it's been saved. So I can keep track of the changes that I'm making that are overruling the CPC pest status. I may find that there are some pests in this list that I don't have very much knowledge of. So I can click here and go to view the datasheet. And this has given me access to the information that's available in the crop protection compendium in a new browser window. So if we explore a little bit further, there are some additional reasons for excluding pests from the assessment. We can have a look at that once more. You'll see that you could also edit the distribution status for the country of origin, and also whether the pest is indeed a pest of the crop and of the commodity type. So the work doesn't have to all be done in one sitting on editing the pest list. You can work on it gradually. But it is important to consider whether the pests meet the criteria of a quarantine pest for their pathway statuses, so that you don't spend time later assessing them in detail when that is not required. So please do check the distribution and host statuses as carefully as possible. If you want to include a pest that hasn't been picked up at all in this PRA, there's an option at the bottom here to add a pest. And this allows you to search for a pest in the CPC. You can view the datasheet if you want to. You need to add the pest type. It's not required that you add the regulatory status because often that will be not applicable. And then you can save. And you'll see that that pest has now been added in here at the top to the list of pests. So it's quite flexible. Under the User Actions menu, it is also possible to add a regulatory status for a pest that's included here. So you can select Add Regulatory Status if you already know that a pest is listed in your country's quarantine pest list. So there are 4 options here: a quarantine pest absent from the country, present but not widely distributed, a regulated non-quarantine pest, and we have a 4th category here, which is for pests that have been risk assessed but are not yet officially listed. So there may be some background to those pests and you want to flag them up in this list. So I'm just going to select one of these. And you'll see here that that regulatory status number is displaying in this column. And that helps you to perhaps focus on some of the pests that may be of most concern. So this means that it's already listed as a quarantine pest for Zambia. As we're working on the pest list, we are building up a section in the PRA report, but we also have the option to download the full pest list here. I'm not going to do that just now, but it generates a CSV file which can be opened in Excel and used for sharing or checking against other sources. So it might be convenient to have the full pest list, which includes both of these groups of pests, in a spreadsheet format as well, outside of the tool. After working on the pest list, the next stage is to enter the risk assessment. So I'm just going to choose one of these pests and I'm going to click on the button Select Assessment here. And this shows a pop-up which gives us 2 options. One is to conduct a full detailed risk assessment. The other is to carry out a rapid assessment. This is when we're unsure whether this pest needs a full PRA or not. If I click on this option, it tells us that there are 2 questions further to consider before justifying a full risk assessment. The first is, does the pest have potential for establishment and spread in the PRA area? And there are some factors to consider. I'm going to say, yes, I think the pest does have potential because it's actually quite widespread in other countries in the region. And then, does this pest have potential for economic, environmental and social consequences in the PRA area? And here I'm going to say, well, I'm not quite sure because I haven't got that information to hand just now. Now, I could have had a look in the datasheet to see if it will tell me anything quickly to help answer these questions, because what I'm trying to do at this point is to exclude any pests which don't have potential for establishment and impact at this point. So I'll continue with this. It says it is recommended that you conduct a full risk assessment for this pest. Do you want to start that now? I'm going to select no. What it's done here on this button is to change the status to full PRA recommended. That means that the rapid assessment has been done. If I click on another pest and I carry out the rapid assessment, I can say I'm unsure about this one, but actually there is no evidence of economic impact in any of the countries this virus has been introduced to. I can save that, and it tells me that a full risk assessment is not recommended for this pest. And you'll see that at that point, I have managed to exclude this pest from further consideration. This is helpful because at the moment, the list of pests that meet the criteria for pathway consideration for this PRA is high. It's 93 pests. So I really want to remove as many as possible where there is no justification for detailed risk assessment work. The rapid assessment results are also included in the PRA report, so there is a record of the decisions that you've made at this point. The next thing I'm going to do now is go forward with the Spirea aphid, for which I've already decided that a full PRA is required. So I'm going to click on the risk assessment button here. And this presents a series of templates to complete for each of the steps in the risk assessment. The probability of entry, probability of establishment, probability of spread, and potential consequences. The datasheet is already open in my browser window, but there's a link to view it here. This provides a good starting point for assessing the risk, but it is only a starting point, so you are expected to do research elsewhere on the internet and in other resources that are available to you, because it's very demanding to answer these questions, and as much evidence is required to justify the risk rating that you apply. So in this case, this starts with what is the probability of the pest being associated with the commodity at origin, and some factors to consider are presented here. So the risk assessment template gives you a checklist of matters to consider in order to determine the overall probability of entry for this pest by this pathway. There is a text box here for entering your information. So I'm just going to put here, pest is prevalent at production sites, and I would obviously fill in as much detail as possible. I would add references into the reference section, which you'll see has already got a citation for the CPC, which was used to generate the pest list in the PRA. So I can edit the references when I have some further information and save that here as I go through. There is one reference list for the whole PRA, so this box is accessible from all parts of the PRA. So the idea is that you follow the questions, so there's 5 under probability of entry, in order to determine the summary for this particular pest's entry. So you would start building up your evidence. You can answer the questions in any order, and then you can select the rating, and you can also document the confidence level. So you have the opportunity to indicate whether you had complete information or very sparse information to answer the question. And there's nothing that requires you to answer the questions in order, or in fact all of them, but it is advised that you do complete as fully as possible. Once you've done that, it's your task to assign a summary rating for that step and add a summary note here. And when you click next, that will save that page and move you on to the next step of the risk assessment. So this is just for one pest in this pathway, and you'll see they're all quite similar in structure. Under potential consequences, there is a button here to import some generic information from the CPC. So this is a question: what is the level of economic loss to agriculture, forestry, or horticulture associated with this pest in its existing geographic range? So that's not exactly specific to this PRA, and there's a button to import the text from the datasheet. This can be edited, deleted, and certainly added to for this PRA, but it's to help you to make a start on that. But there are not very many cases where it is directly relevant to import content from the datasheet. In most cases, you need to really read the whole datasheet to make your assessment, to answer the questions. So if I had completed this, I might select these, enter some text, and save that. So once I've worked through the steps, you can see that I'm starting to build up a summary of the risk assessment here. So this tells me my probability of entry, summary rating was medium, the confidence level was high. These haven't been completed yet, but under potential consequences, I had a summary rating of medium and a confidence level of medium. This is presented in one screen to help you to conclude the risk assessment stage by answering the question: does the pest require phytosanitary measures? Yes or no? So if we select yes, you can then save, and that then moves this pest on to the risk management stage of the PRA. Here, there's a fairly simple form which presents some options for risk management. So in this pathway of introducing apples from South Africa, what are the interventions that are required to reduce the likelihood of entry and establishment in Zambia? So here you would tick the appropriate box. So this is at the place of production. And you would provide your details that make this a specific risk management measure for this pathway. So this is organized with at the point of production, after harvest, and during transport, at the point of entry, after entry. So for instance, do you want to set up some sort of surveillance? And some more general risk management measures. At one extreme, you've got prohibition of the commodity completely because the risks can't be mitigated. But at the other end, you have an option here to tick that the risk is quite similar to other pests that have already been addressed. For instance, there may be other insects, and there's no need to put any specific measures for this one. It's not the most damaging. It will already be covered by phytosanitary measures that have been documented elsewhere. So you can select that. And then you can add a summary note to be clear on the most appropriate risk management for this pest. So if we click Save here, it's taken us back to assess another pest. And so you can work through the risk assessment, the risk management. So here you've got the risk management screen, which may have a list of pests, and the pest risk analysis summary. I'm going to show you that you don't have to remember everything about the screens that we're looking at here. So there are some page tour buttons on this screen, but also on the pest lists and risk assessments. So you can take a page tour to familiarize yourself with the different elements on the screen that I've just covered. I'm just going to now go back and look at the existing PRA that had already been created to show you the example that's a bit further along. So if I go into this earlier one, It's the same pathway. It just has a little bit more information in some of the sections. If I look at risk management here, you'll see that a number of pests have had that risk assessment stage completed by answering the question, does this pest require phytosanitary measures? If after that risk assessment, the answer to that question is no, then that pest is shown as not requiring risk management and it's not considered further in this PRA. Here you'll see that the risk assessment ratings are carried forwards. Now, in this table, you can always go back and update the risk assessment if you have new information. You can also view the data sheets from here as well, so you can keep track of your progress in assessing the risk management for the pests in your PRA. Those with continue have had some information added for the risk management already. Not in that case though. What I want to show you on this PRA is the risk analysis summary. And this is where those different options that were selected for individual pests are now presented by management option. And so the management options are listed and the pests that they have been selected for are provided next to that. This is so that you can make a summary of the overall phytosanitary measures that are required in order to import the apples from South Africa safely. So there's a section here to specify your import conditions and be very clear on what is required and your justifications for those conditions. There's also a next steps text box here, which enables you to identify what needs to happen next. In this case, I've put peer review of pest risk assessments and further information required for, well, it should be from the exporter regarding packaging options. And then it's also important for the PRA report to add the contact details of the risk assessment team. When you've completed the PRA to your satisfaction, you can change the PRA status to complete, and that will be indicated in your PRA list on the home page. What I'm going to do now is generate the PRA report from the top menu. So this can be done at any point. It can be done as soon as you've created the pest list if you wish. So there are two options here. View report is the main report. It's the most concise. View report with template questions includes the blank template for the individual pests risk assessments and is useful if you want to complete that offline in Word. So let's just have a look at the view report, which is usually the preferred option. The first view of the PRA report is in HTML, and that's quite useful for quickly looking at what's been entered so far. It can also be used for printing, but you can download the report into a Word format by clicking on this button and opening the report in Word. So this is structured with the most important sections in the main part of the PRA and the detail added to appendixes at the bottom. To navigate in this document, I suggest that you open up the navigation pane. It just provides the headings for accessing the different sections. And I'll quickly show you that all the content that you've entered is organized in this PRA report. So we've got the initiation part where we set up the background to the PRA. We've got the list of pests potentially requiring phytosanitary measures. So these are the ones that we're interested in for our PRA. Then we've got the risk assessment summary. So these are the pests that we've actually entered the probability of entry, establishment, spread, or consequences. We then have the risk management summary, which is very similar to that pest risk analysis page in the tool. So it's organized by management option. And then we have the pest risk analysis summary page here. So that shows the import conditions, the next steps, and the contact details. And then the references are added at the bottom. This then leaves the 4 appendixes, which show the full pest list as a table. So those are the pests that are included and excluded from the assessment. The modified pest records, where the CPC status for distribution, hosts, and commodity have been overruled by the risk assessor. So those are the modifications and the notes that have been added. The next appendix is the results of the rapid assessment. And so this is particularly important for those where the rapid assessment includes a no and the pest is no longer considered in the PRA after that. And then in Appendix 4, we have a set of the full risk assessments and risk management options as mini PRAs for the individual pests that have been selected for assessment. So we'll see here, here's the Spirea aphid that we were looking at. And this looks very similar to the format for the pest-initiated PRA report. The difference here between this report, which is more concise, and the other report with the full template questions, is in this report, only those questions that have been answered are included. The other one includes the whole template, so that might be useful if you don't want to spend so much time on the tool, but you want to perhaps complete it outside of the tool in Word. I think that really concludes the demonstration for the pathway-initiated PRA.